Welcome to the first full episode of Guided by Love, the podcast. I'm Nick Place, the producer and host of this show. This podcast is a companion to the book Guided by Love, A Minister's Thoughts on Love, Hope, and Justice, written by Reverend Rebecca M. Bryan, the settled minister at First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in the beautiful seaside town of Newburyport, Massachusetts. The book and this podcast will feature sermons by Reverend Rebecca on many topics, including nature, theology, what it means to be human, what is spirituality, and justice. Today's featured sermon is titled Come Sunday and was delivered on Sunday, October 23rd, 2022. Now, I'd like to welcome to the studio, as always, Reverend Rebecca. You know, this sermon is a very touching one involving your relationship with a certain miniature donkey. I happen to also know that you have a wonderful dog, Charlotte, for whom you care deeply. Can you tell us about how you came to have such close connections with animals?
Oh, Nick, it's so good to be here. And, you know, as we're talking about this, I just want to share that. So this sermon was actually delivered at our animal blessing service, which we do each year. And this particular year, we were still meeting outside. It was on that side of COVID where for this service, we were in a park locally, and people came with their dogs and their cats and young, old, puppies, elderly, and we blessed them. And it's also an intergenerational service, meaning that all ages are there. We had little ones, little human ones running around to, again, elderly, and all of us were together. And when I imagined what it was I wanted to share that day, this story came to me. It was a story that had happened not that long before the actual day that I delivered it. And I debated at first whether to do that, whether to share this story. I wasn't sure if it would matter as much, sorry, I'm going to get emotional, but to other people as it meant to me. But I chose to share it, and I shared it as a story, which you'll hear. It is a story. And animals, how did I come to love and have such a deep connection with animals? I'm not sure I can entirely answer that, but I can tell you that it is so integral to who I am and has been my whole life, as is my deep connection and reverence for all of nature, of which we are a part, right? It's not something that's just outside our door or out the window. Nature is life. I mean, we are life. All kinds of animals are life. And I would say that my connection with animals, if I really went back to where did it get encouraged or fostered, I'd put a couple of pins in that. It's certainly who I am and how I came in. I happen to have a father who shared. His love was very similar to mine, although in some ways a little bit different. He was a physicist, so a lot of his was about the hugeness, right? But he also deeply respected and loved animals. He had at one time with his wife 7 dogs, for example, all of whom were stray, and I grew up surrounded by them when I would be with them. But he also taught me how to hike, and he taught me how to canoe, and the times we would spend together were often in nature together. And he taught me what a moose was when I first met one, and so that I would give thanks and gratitude to my father, who never laughed at all or made fun of the depth of appreciation and gratitude and meaning I found with animals and in them. He sent me Ranger Rick magazine forever until I grew up to National Wildlife. And so it's always been there. I wanted to be a veterinarian, so James Herriot was my hero. And sometimes I think being a minister and being a veterinarian have a lot of similarities. And so the other thing that I would say about how I came to have such a deep connection is just the reality of how I experience God in nature and in all things, but in many ways in the most vulnerable, be that people, be that earth, be that, animals, right? So spending as much time as I do and always have in nature, finding my own peace, whether it's in the woods, at the ocean, holding a dog, rescuing a stray dog, greeting a puppy with a friend. looking into the eyes of cows, deer. They are our kin. And so I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's a great reminder that humans really are animals, and we're actually not that far removed from the rest of the animal kingdom.
That's right. We are. And certainly science, you can read all the science about the genes and the chromosomes, but what we really need, I believe, is to look into the eyes of each other, right? Again, another human, look into the eyes and to see the soul of the universe. And that is true with all living creatures. And someday we'll even talk about plants. Now I believe it's there too, but it's the spark of the realness. And without that, it's much harder to really have compassion and care.
It makes you think about how humans and animals throughout history, before we industrialized farming and the commercial raising of animals, we had such an essential interaction with animals and nature. We relied on the land for survival and had a kinship with the land.
Yes, like an interdependence. We still do. We just can forget or think that, right? Because we buy everything off a shelf. It has nothing to do with animals. You're right, Nick. I mean, when I think about that, it wasn't so long ago when there was no question about the deep interdependence between different forms of animals, humans and others, that, you're right, that it was a different time and a different life. And it's just another example of how cut off we can become in this day and age when we think it's all about a computer screen or an Amazon delivery or whatever. So I appreciate that reminder because you're absolutely right.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. Today's sermon, Come Sunday, was recorded at an outdoor service during the COVID-19 pandemic. You'll notice the sound quality changes just a bit as there was some rain that day. Reverend Rebecca, would you lead us into the sermon?
So yes, this particular sermon that we're about to share with you, Sunday, as you'll hear, was a miniature donkey at a place that I volunteered that was what I did on my days off for years, which was to spend time at an equine sanctuary. And I'm delighted we've chosen this to be today's sermon. This is a true story that happened less than a month ago in my life, and I am honored to share it with you. I hope that I can do it justice. So I invite you to open your heart. Maybe bring yourself to a farm. This time it's a horse farm in West Newbury. Some of you know I spend my Monday day off mornings there. Monday mornings are usually one of my favorite times of the week, although I say that about a lot of times of the week. But I do love Monday mornings. It is my other church. I get to go and muck out stalls and pet horses and talk to donkeys and love mules and feed them and be with them and be with the sun. It is the time I take to be with my beloved equine animal friends, and I think many of you know that animals are incredibly important in my life. This particular Monday, though, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't feel like going. It had been a long time since I had had a Monday off where I didn't do that. My husband and I had gotten our COVID boosters the night before, and I had secretly hoped I might feel just bad enough to call out from my volunteer duties without that guilt. It was true. I woke up and I didn't feel very well. Although I wasn't really sick, I easily could have justified staying home with my warm cup of tea. But something got me out the door. I thought it was my guilt. And so I did the double arrow where I was shaming myself for the guilt I thought was getting me out the door. Good Lord, I said to myself, what is wrong with you? Can't you just relax? But something had me pulling on my barn boots and gloves and walking out that door. By the time I got to the farm, I just fell into my typical routine and almost forgot that I almost didn't go. I just started to do what I do every Monday morning. Greeted the animals who are where I park my car, who immediately start neighing because they want their food. Did what I did, walked through the barn. Everything was normal. Until I got over to the right-hand side of the farm, where immediately I sensed something was awry. My footsteps, almost on their own accord, slowed, almost to a stop. I stood there with these buckets of grain up my arm and in my hands, and I knew something was going on. Something was different. The air was still. I don't know if you've ever gone into a place where the air is still. Nothing was moving. The animals that are normally quite loud and precocious weren't offering me their customary neighing and braying and all of the eagerness to get the grain hanging upon my arms. Instead, to an animal on the right-hand side of the farm, their heads were hung low, looking at the ground. I opened the gate to the paddock where we had 2 miniature donkeys staying, only to find that one of them had passed in the night. Its smallish body was laying there waiting to be found. And I realized immediately why the animals all stood still and quiet, even the sheep. Their heads were hung out of respect for their fellow. I knelt down next to this little donkey and called the owner of the farm to let her know. As I waited for her to come, I suddenly realized that this donkey's mate or partner was nowhere to be seen. So I went into the small shelter that is there in the paddock, and I found the other miniature donkey. Now, miniature donkeys come about up to my belly button. She was standing in the back of the shed, shaking. She was so upset. I later learned that she was the mother of the other miniature donkey who had died. And what proceeded to happen was nothing short of a miraculous spiritual experience. That donkey and I communed. And I am an animal lover, and I have never experienced anything like it. She laid into my body and put her head into my pelvic bowl and just collapsed, just sobbed. And I stayed with her, and we cried, and we'd walk a little bit, and we would stop. And eventually, I had to go out and do my work, so I went further out into the fields, and I saw her walking in circles in the paddock, just walking in circles. And I went back over to her, and I knelt down, and I thought, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm going to pray with this mama. And we prayed. And I thanked this mama for bringing this other baby donkey into the world. And my heart broke. You see, there is no separation in God's creation. There is no separation. Someday I may share with you what I ended up speaking into my phone after I left hours later, sobbing as I connected to every mother who's ever lost a child. There is no separation in God's creation. I later learned that this miniature donkey who passed, her name, the one who was living, her name is Sunday. And in the days to come, volunteers rallied around her, all of us. We'd spend time with her, we would walk her. She didn't want to eat, she was a grieving mama. So we fed her molasses in hay, so it would taste sweet and stick to her bones. We weren't sure if she was going to pull out of this. so we loved her all the more. And that went on for a couple of weeks until last Monday, when I walked into the farm and I walked up to the fence, and there she was looking at me, and she only comes midway, but there's an opening, and there she is looking at me, and I'll put the picture in the steeple. She opened up her little mouth, and her buck teeth showed, and she just brayed, like, ah! This is an animal who had not made those sounds in weeks. She was saying to me, "Hey, where's my breakfast?" She's come through. I know she carries that memory and that love in her heart, as do I. But the resiliency of spirits is real. The sheeps are back to being persnickety. The other animals are just as loud as they've always been. And we shared something that morning that I will always carry. As I said, it was a spiritual experience. We were two beings coming together during a time of unbearable pain. I will never be the same. My love and respect for the animal kingdom, including their wisdom, their interconnection with each other, their love for one another, is miraculous, just like humans. Amen.
Thank you for joining us on Guided by Love, the podcast. The next episode will air in 2 weeks on Monday, October 20th. We look forward to continuing this journey with you. Please make sure to follow and subscribe to Guided by Love on your favorite podcast app. If you'd like more information about First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts, please visit frsuu.org. That's frsuu.org. If you'd like to purchase a copy of the book Guided by Love, please visit your local bookstore and request a copy, or visit your favorite online bookshop. This episode is a production of FRSUU Newburyport and was edited by me, Nick Place. Thank you as always to Reverend Rebecca M. Bryan for sharing her thoughts and sermons with all of us. See you next time on Guided by Love, the podcast. And until then, be kind to yourself, live in peace, and return again in great joy.